This menu on the center of my screen is Wofi, an application launcher for wlroots compositors like Sway, and I can use it to launch any graphical application like Firefox. I made my own customization from scratch so that it follows a style similar to the one I have for Waybar, which is this bar on the top of the screen. And as you can see, I also added a gradient here, but you can disable that in the configuration if you want. So we go to the configuration, I delete this line, save the file, go back to the first workspace, launch Wofi, and now there is no gradient, and now the style is basically the same as the Waybar. Or you can also come back here and change the colors of the gradient. For example, let's change this color to 88DDBB. Save the file, go back to this workspace, launch Wofi, and now this is the color we set as the left side of the gradient. And as you can see, this is just a regular CSS file, and in a few moments we are going to be editing this file so that we have the configuration you can see here. But by default, Wofi looks like this. So in this video, I will show you how to create a Wofi configuration starting from this default configuration and leave it like the one you saw before. And you will also be able to create your own customization that fits your own style. So to set Wofi as your launcher on Sway, remember that you need to modify the Sway configuration file. And in this line, you must set the menu to Wofi -- show run. So this is the line that configures Wofi as your application launcher. And once you've done that, if you press Mod and D, Wofi should appear on screen. If you don't know what the Sway configuration file is, you can go watch my previous video where I set up Sway on Arch Linux from scratch. And now we are going to create our own Wofi configuration files. And for that, we first need to create a configuration directory for Wofi. So we mkdir.config/Wofi. And in that directory, we need to create a file called style.css. And I will open that file using a text editor. So this file is just a regular CSS file where we have to define the rules that we are going to apply to each Wofi element. So the first element or selector that I'm going to use is the window selector. Here, this is going to apply to the whole Wofi window. And the first rule I am going to set is font size, 28px, semicolon. I save the file, and now when I launch Wofi with Mod D, you can see that the font is slightly bigger than it was before. And to do this, you don't even need to reload Sway. You can just save the file. Let's change it to another value. Here, let's say 48px. We save the file. We don't need to reload Sway. We just launch Wofi again. And as you can see, the font is changed now. But for now, I'll just leave the font at 32px. And now I will change the font family. I'll set it to Roboto Mono Medium. But before we save the file, you should, if you haven't installed the font yet, you should install it. And this font is installed with the package TTF Roboto Mono. This is the package that you need to install if you want to use the font. And okay, now save the file, and now you can launch Wofi, and it should have a different font, as you can see. And the next thing I will change is the background color and the text color. So I want the background color and text color to be the same background as Waybar, and the text to be white, like in these buttons. So I will add the following rules. The first one is background-color, and in my case the color is an RGBA color because I want it to have a little bit of transparency, so that's why I use RGBA. and the values are 50, 50, 50, and 0.9, which is the same level of transparency that I have on Waybar. And okay, so I save that, and if we launch Wofi now, you will see that the background color worked, but the letters don't look good with that background because there is barely any contrast between the text and the background. So we set the color property to be white. And this way we save the file and we launch Wofi, and now the text is white and the background is dark gray. But now I want the selected entry to look like these buttons we have right here. So I'm going to use the background color and the text color from these buttons. So for that, I need to add the following selector, hash or whatever you call this symbol, entry colon selected. And background color should be BBCCDD, and the color should be just 33, 33, and 33. Now we save the file and we launch Wofi. And as you can see, the background color is working, but for some reason the text color, oh yes, the text color, you don't have to change it here, you have to change it in another selector. Now that I remember, the selector you should use to change the color of the selected option or the currently highlighted option is the following: text colon selected. And here you just set the color you want. In my case it's this one. Okay, save. And now we have the black text or the dark gray text when it's the selected option, and it looks the same way as this. It looks consistent. And I think we can just delete this one. Yep. And now you might be wondering, how do I know that these are specifically the selectors that I need to use in the CSS file? And there are two answers to that question. One is that you should look at the man pages of Wofi, specifically the page 5 of the man pages, and this has a section called CSS selectors here that talks about the different selectors that you can use in Wofi. And there's also a web page that I'm gonna show you. Wofi config, this one. In this website, cloudninja.pw, there is a page that has basically the same information you can see here. It's almost the same information. And if you prefer to browse it on a website instead of reading the man pages, you can just see here the examples. And this page is also very useful. I'm gonna be putting the URL of this page in the description of this video. So those are the two sources of information for the CSS file for the selectors. But now let's go back to the file we were editing. And now I want to change this input section here. I'm gonna change the background and the text color. So to change the input style, we need to use the hash input selector. And I'm going to set the background color to an RGBA color of 50, 50, the same color we had before, but this time with opacity of 0.5. Let's launch Wofi, and as you can see, the opacity, the color is very similar to this one. It's the same color, but with more transparency. And next, so when we type here, as you can see, the text is black, but that doesn't look good on this background. So I'm going to make the text white. So color white. We save the file and we launch Wofi. Now when we type here, the text is white. And another thing I'm going to do is I am going to add a little bit of padding in these entries and also in the input box, so that the text doesn't look so cluttered, or so that we have some margins here. Okay, so for that I'm going to add here padding of 0.25 EM. And now there is some, maybe you don't notice it, but there's some padding here. And in the, we're going to add another selector, and it's going to be called entry, because this one is going to apply to all entries, not only the currently selected entry, but all of these entries at the same time. So here we are also going to add padding of 0.25 EM. We save the file and we launch this. And as you can see, there is some distance here between the beginning of the window and the beginning of the text. So that looks, in my opinion, it looks a little bit better. And now, if you pay attention to my waybar, this has rounded corners. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new selector, which is going to be an asterisk. And this selector, the asterisk, means that it's going to apply to all elements. So what I'm going to put here, I don't know why it's doing that, but here inside I'm going to put border dash radius colon 3px. Save that. And now we launch Wofi. And as you can see, the entries have rounded corners here, and it looks even more similar to the waybar configuration. And another thing I do is, as you can see, the input box has this border, and I just disable that by typing here border none. So that's going to disable all the default borders that we have here on Wofi. Now, how did I add the gradient that you saw at the beginning of the video? Simply here in the entry selected, which is the element that had the gradient, you type below the background color, you type background colon, and here you just type linear dash gradient, and this function is going to take 3 arguments. And the first argument is the direction of the gradient. The second argument is the first color, or the color on the left in this case, and the third argument is the other color. So I'm going to use these colors, and we open Wofi, and this is the gradient we have here. But if we change this color to be, for example, like that, and this way, this is another color, and we can change this to be more green, for example, we have that, which also looks kind of weird, but still kind of cool. So that's the gradient part. And the last detail that I like to add is add a border similar to this white line here, and I add that on the window selector. I simply add a border dash bottom of 3px solid white, and now we have that, which is similar to this, or it's the same style at least. Okay, so that's all the style configuration for now. But there's another important thing that you must know with regards to Wofi, and that is that there are 2 main modes of function. So there's one mode that is called run, and there's a mode that is called drun. Here you can see it. Run is the mode that we're using right now, and it searches in the executables that are in the path. And you can just launch, for example, all of these entries here are in my path. But if I wanted to launch another application that is not in my path, I wouldn't be able to launch it with run mode. In that case, I would have to use drun. And this drun mode, what it does is that it looks for .desktop files or desktop files. And these files are found in these directories. And some applications install their desktop files whenever you install the application, and the desktop file is automatically installed, which is the case of Firefox. So we are going to try this mode using Firefox. So how do you enable this mode? There are two ways. The first one is modifying the Sway configuration file that we looked at the beginning. And here, part of this line is telling Wofi which mode to run in. So here we're telling it to run or to execute in run mode. But if we type drun here and save this file, and we reload Sway, now when we press mod D, this is a different menu. As you can see, there is a little arrow here, and these are the desktop files that Wofi has found. And if you press the arrow, you will notice that there are two options, and these options are also defined in the desktop file of Firefox. So I can simply use my mouse or use my keyboard to select this option. And these desktop files are usually for graphical applications. So maybe you want to choose this mode instead of the run mode. But there's another way to enable this drun mode, which is to just delete this from here, from this Sway configuration file, and you create another file which is called config/wofi config. And now in this file, you can define which mode gets executed. And it's as simple as opening this file and say mode equals drun. Okay, we save the file, we quit, and well, we still need to reload Sway because we changed the Sway configuration file. But now when we launch Wofi, it's still in drun mode. And now if we modify this same config file and say that we want to execute it in run mode, we save the file, and now it's in run mode again. So it's much more comfortable and better, in my opinion, to decide the mode based on this config file in the Wofi configuration directory. And there's also another advantage of using the drun mode, which is that you can have icons or images. So to do that, you have to be in drun mode, and you enable the allow images option equals true. Okay, we save this file, and now when we launch Wofi in drun mode, the images are going to appear here, as you can see. And now that we have images here, we can also go back to our style configuration file, and we can add the image selector, and here we can give it, for example, a margin .25 and a margin right, so that the images don't look so close to the text, because it doesn't look very good. So now we launch Wofi, I save the file, and now it looks a little better because there's some space between between the image and the text, right? So those are all the style configurations, but there are still two things that you can change in the other configuration file, Wofi config. You can also change the image size with image_size, and you can set it to, for example, a very small size if you want, 12, and the icons are very small, or a bigger size, let's say 64, and now the icons are bigger, so you can use this selector here. And another thing is the width of the whole window. So this window is very wide, but if you want to make it less wide, you can put the width in pixels here. You can use either pixels or percentage. So let's use pixels first. Let's say 300 pixels. Now that's very thin. Let's say 600 pixels instead. That's more reasonable. And you can also use percentages of the screen. So for example, if I say 90%, this is going to take up 90% of my screen width. And the default is 50% if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so you can use either percentages, or if you don't use a percentage thing, it's going to be interpreted as pixels. But I just don't use this. So those are all the things that I wanted to show you today. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe. And if you want to see my configurations, they are in this GitHub repository. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching.